The Moonfire throne had never witnessed such a betrayal. Revna pressed her spine against the cold marble pillar, hidden in the shadows of the western gallery where servants were forbidden to linger. Below her, the great hall of Karveth blazed with 10,000 candles, their flames reflected in the polished obsidian floors until the entire chamber seemed to float upon a sea of fire. She should not have come. Her hand trembled against her lower belly, where the secret she carried had just begun to swell beneath her gown. 6 weeks since her last bleeding. 6 weeks since the night Kale had pulled her into his chambers and worshipped her body until dawn painted the sky. 6 weeks since he had pressed his mouth to the curve of her hip and sunk his teeth into her flesh, marking her as his fated mate in the old way, the way that could never be undone. When the throne council convenes, he had whispered against her skin, "I will declare you before the realm. No more hiding, no more stolen moments. You will be my Luna, Revna, my queen, the mother of my heirs." She had believed every word. Now she watched from the shadows as the man she loved prepared to choose another. The Alpha King stood at the base of the Moonfire throne, his powerful frame rigid beneath ceremonial black and crimson. Even from this distance, Revna could see the sharp angles of his face, the dark hair that fell across his brow, the commanding presence that made wolves twice his age bow their heads in submission. But something was wrong. His eyes, those fierce amber eyes that had blazed with hunger when he looked upon her, seemed hollow, flat, like windows into an empty room. "The candidates will now present themselves," High Elder Mordecai announced, his ancient voice echoing through the hushed assembly. Revna's nails carved crescents into her palms as 5 women in flowing white ascended the dais steps. Daughters of the great houses, each one groomed from birth for this possibility. And leading them, with hair like burnished gold and a smile sharp enough to cut glass, walked Oriana, her sister. The crowd murmured with approval. The Grey Veins were old blood, respected blood, and Oriana had been the shining jewel of their house since childhood. Beautiful, charming, beloved by all who met her. No one knew the venom that lived beneath that golden surface, no one except Revna. Oriana's cornflower eyes swept the gallery, and for one terrible moment, they found Revna's hiding place. Her sister's smile widened by a fraction, a secret smile, a triumphant smile, the smile of a woman who had already won. Ice flooded Revna's veins. Oriana knew. Somehow, impossibly, Oriana knew about the claiming bite, about the secret meetings, perhaps even about the child. And she had done something. "Kale, Alpha King of Karveth, blood of the first moon," the High Elder intoned. "You have heard the Council's wisdom. You have considered the alliances and treaties that will shape our kingdom's future. The realm awaits your choice." Silence descended like a shroud. Revna stopped breathing. The claiming mark on her hip burned with sudden vicious heat, and she gasped at the sensation. Through their bond, she should have felt his certainty, his love, his determination to claim her before all witnesses. Instead, she felt nothing. A void where Kale's presence should have blazed. "Please," she whispered to whatever gods might listen. "Please, let him feel me. Please, let him remember." The Alpha King stepped forward. His gait was wrong, mechanical. His movements lacked the predatory grace she knew as intimately as her own heartbeat. "I choose." His voice rang out, hollow as a crypt, Oriana of House Greyvein. The great hall erupted into chaos. Wolves howled their approval. Nobles embraced. Warriors stamped their feet in celebration of an alliance that would strengthen Karveth's bloodlines for generations. And Revna felt the world tilt beneath her feet. The mark on her hip blazed with agony. She doubled over, biting her tongue to keep from screaming as fire radiated through her flesh. This was wrong. A rejection should have severed the bond cleanly, leaving nothing but numbness. This felt like being torn apart from the inside. Through tear-blurred vision, she watched Kale take Oriana's hand, watched him raise it to his lips in the gesture of acceptance, watched her sister smile with vicious triumph, while the father of Revna's unborn child showed no recognition at all. He did not search for her in the crowd. He did not hesitate. He did not seem to remember she existed. A sob clawed up Revna's throat. She stumbled backward, her shoulder striking stone, her ankle twisting on the uneven floor. But she kept moving. She had to keep moving. If she stopped, the grief would swallow her whole. The servants' passages were deserted, everyone having abandoned their posts to witness history being made. Revna ran through them blind, one hand pressed to her burning mark, the other wrapped protectively around her belly. The child. His child. Their child. Conceived in love and claimed by fate. Growing inside her while he chose her sister. She would not stay to watch him wed Oriana. Would not remain in the castle where she had surrendered everything, her heart, her body, her very soul, to a man who had thrown her away without a second glance. Revna burst into her small chamber and began to pack with shaking hands. Her fingers refused to cooperate. Revna fumbled with the clasp of her traveling bag, her vision swimming with tears she refused to shed. Not yet. Not until she was far from this place, far from the sound of celebration that echoed through the castle walls like a mockery of everything she had believed. She packed only what she could carry: 2 simple dresses, her mother's silver ring, the only inheritance left after the woman's death, a pouch of dried herbs for the nausea that plagued her mornings. The claiming mark throbbed with every heartbeat, a wound that would not close. "You knew," Revna whispered to the empty room, her hands stilling on the rough fabric of her bag. "Oriana, you knew, and you took him anyway." The realization was a knife between her ribs. Her sister had watched her slip away to secret meetings, had seen the glow in her cheeks, the marks on her throat that Revna had struggled to hide, had pieced together the truth, and decided that what belonged to Revna should belong to her instead, as it always had, as it always would. The golden daughter and the shadow-touched spare. Their father had made his preference clear from the moment Revna's gift had manifested. While Oriana bloomed under the summer sun, charming courtiers and collecting admirers, Revna had learned to walk between patches of darkness, to bend shadows to her will, to become invisible in plain sight. Unnatural, Lord Ambrose had called her. Unsettling. Only Kale had ever looked at her shadow gift and seen beauty. Revna choked on another sob and forced herself to keep packing. She could not think about him. Could not remember the way he had traced the darkness that sometimes pooled in her palms, calling it magnificent. Could not recall the reverence in his voice when he whispered that the moon itself must have marked her as his, a creature of night and shadow to match his inner beast. Those memories were poison now. A distant howl rose above the celebration, long and mournful, cutting through the music and laughter like a blade. Revna froze, her hand hovering over her bag. She knew that voice. Even in wolf form, she would know Kale's howl anywhere. She had heard it too many times, usually in the aftermath of pleasure, a sound of satisfaction and claiming that had made her blood sing. This was different. This was anguish. For one heartbeat, hope flickered in her chest. Then she crushed it ruthlessly. He had chosen Oriana, before the entire kingdom. Whatever pain he felt now, it was not for her. Perhaps he simply mourned his freedom. Perhaps the weight of kingship had finally settled upon his shoulders. It did not matter. Revna pulled on her traveling cloak, the darkest one she owned, and slung her bag across her body. She paused at the frost-covered window, looking out at the bonfires being lit across the capital. Somewhere in that great hall, her sister was accepting congratulations, planning a wedding, perhaps already scheming to remove any obstacles to her new position, obstacles like a pregnant former lover. Revna's hand pressed flat against her belly. "I will protect you," she swore to the life growing inside her. No matter what, no matter where we must go, you will never know the cruelty of this place. She pressed her fingers to the cold glass, a silent farewell to every dream she had built within these walls. Then she pulled the shadows around her like a second skin and slipped through the servants' gate, swallowed by the winter night. She did not see the figure that burst onto the balcony above her chamber moments later. She did not see amber eyes blazing with sudden, desperate awareness, scanning the darkness for any trace of her presence. And she did not hear the howl that shattered the sky seconds after. A sound so raw and broken that wolves across the kingdom stumbled in their celebrations, overcome by their alpha's inexplicable grief. By the time Kale reached her empty chamber, Revna was already gone. Only her scent remained, mixed with something else. Something that made his wolf throw itself against the cage of his ribs, clawing for release. The unmistakable fragrance of new life. His child. His mate was carrying his child. And she had vanished into the night, believing he had betrayed her. Kale's roar of anguish shook the foundations of the castle. 3 months later, the village of Brindlemore had almost forgotten it had a newcomer. Revna had arrived at winter's peak, a young widow, she claimed, seeking refuge from a grief too heavy to bear. The village elders had taken pity on her swollen belly and the haunted shadows that lived in her eyes. They had offered her the abandoned cottage near the marshlands in exchange for her skills as a midwife. A fitting irony, she thought, bringing other women's children into the world while hiding the secret of her own. Now spring fought to break through the last stubborn frosts, and Revna had become simply the marsh woman, the one who delivered babies, who brewed teas for fevers and poultices for wounds, who kept to herself and asked no questions, expecting none in return. She had given them the name Mora, simple, forgettable. Nothing like the shadow-touched daughter of House Greyvein who had once believed an Alpha King loved her. Every night she lay awake with her hands on her growing belly, feeling the child move beneath her palms. Sometimes the movements came from opposite sides at once, as though two small bodies were vying for space. The village midwife who had examined her suggested she might be carrying twins. Revna tried not to think about what that might mean. The Carveth royal bloodline carried a curse, one that Kale had confided to her during their secret nights together. For 3 generations, no queen had successfully borne an heir. Miscarriages, stillbirths, children who drew breath once and never again. Only a true fated mate can break the curse, Kale had told her, his hand resting on her flat stomach, as if imagining what might grow there. Only children conceived in the bond will survive. If the twins she carried were healthy, if they thrived, it would prove beyond all doubt that she was Kale's true mate. And it would make her a target for anyone who wished to see Oriana's position secured. "You are strong," Revna whispered in the darkness, stroking the taut skin of her belly. "Strong like your father, stubborn like your mother. You will survive this." The claiming mark on her hip had never stopped burning. Revna had examined it countless times, watching in confusion as the scar tissue darkened rather than faded. A rejected mate should have healed within weeks, the mark dissolving like morning mist. That was how the severing worked. Instead, her mark throbbed with heat that kept her awake. It ached when the wind blew from the east, from the direction of the capital. And sometimes, in the depths of night, she swore she felt something pressing against it from the other side. A presence, a searching, a desperate, clawing need that was not her own. But that was impossible. Kale had chosen Oriana. Whatever bond had existed between them should have shattered the moment he spoke another woman's name, unless the bond had never been broken at all. Revna crushed the thought before it could take root. False hope was more dangerous than any poison in her stores. A knock at her door scattered her dark musings. "Mistress Mora?" Young Pippin's voice, the tanner's boy, high with barely contained excitement. "Traders have come from the capital. They bring news." Revna's heart clenched. She rose slowly, one hand supporting her lower back, where the weight of the pregnancy pulled at her spine. "What news?" she asked, opening the door. Pippin's eyes were wide as moons. "The Alpha King, mistress. They say he has gone mad." The world narrowed to a single point. "Mad?" she managed. Pippin nodded vigorously. "The traitors say he has torn apart half the kingdom searching for someone. A woman. No one knows who she is, only that the king will destroy anything that stands between him and finding her." Revna gripped the doorframe to steady herself. The child kicked sharply, as if responding to news of its father. "They say crops have failed in the southern provinces," Pippin continued breathlessly. "They say wolves have grown feral and attack even in daylight. The king's own guard has been sent to every village from here to the eastern mountains, questioning everyone, searching every house." "Searching for what?" Revna whispered, though she already knew. "For her. Whoever she is, she must have done something terrible. The traitors say the king has offered 20,000 gold marks for any information leading to her discovery." 20,000. A fortune that could buy a noble house. The claiming mark seared against her hip, hot as a brand. Revna forced her expression to remain neutral. "The affairs of kings are not our concern. Thank your father for sending you." But after Pippin had scampered away, she sank into her chair with trembling legs. He was searching for her. Why would Kale search for a woman he had publicly rejected? Why would he tear his kingdom apart for a lover he had discarded without hesitation? Unless something had been wrong that night. Unless the emptiness in his eyes had been something other than indifference. Movement at the edge of the marshland caught her attention. Revna's breath stopped. A shape stood between the gnarled willows. Large, four-legged, dark fur drinking in the fading light. A wolf. As she watched, frozen with terror, another emerged beside it. Then another. 4 massive wolves, their eyes fixed on her cottage with an intelligence that was anything but animal. They had found her. The claiming mark would not let her sleep. Revna lay in her narrow bed, staring at the ceiling as heat pulsed through her hip in waves. 3 months of this torment. 3 months of feeling that invisible thread pulling at her soul, urging her eastward toward a man who had shattered her heart before the entire kingdom. She pressed her palm against the mark and felt it throb in response. "Stop," she whispered. "He is not yours anymore. He chose her. He chose Oriana." But the mark did not listen. It never listened. The twins stirred within her, restless as their mother. Revna had begun to feel their distinct personalities in the way they moved. One was calm, methodical, shifting position with deliberate care. The other was fierce, kicking and tumbling as though already eager to fight the world. Like their father, she thought, and immediately wished she hadn't. Dawn crept through her window, pale and reluctant. Revna rose with aching bones and began her morning routine, stoking the fire, brewing tea to settle her stomach, checking her stores of herbs and remedies. The knock came as she was grinding willow bark. "Mistress Mora." The voice belonged to Elder Brennick, the village leader. "A word, if you please." Revna opened the door to find the old man's face creased with worry. "Forgive the early intrusion," he said, "but there is news you should hear. The traders who arrived yesterday, they brought more than goods." "Pippin told me something of it." "He told you the surface. The truth is worse." Brennick glanced over his shoulder as though afraid of being overheard. "The Alpha King has issued a decree. Every village in the realm must submit to inspection by the royal guard. They search for a woman, though no description has been given. Only that she carries something precious that belongs to the crown." Revna's blood turned to ice. Something precious that belongs to the crown. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly. "There is more," Brennick continued grimly. "The traders say the queen, the new Luna, has not conceived. 4 months of marriage and no heir. Whispers spread that the curse remains unbroken. That perhaps the king's choice was... He trailed off, unwilling to speak treason aloud. Was what? Revna pressed. Wrong. The word fell between them like a stone. They say his wolf has turned savage, that he shifts without warning and runs for days, searching, always searching. That he has not slept in weeks. The nobles fear he will go feral before the year ends. Feral. The word struck Revna like a physical blow. An alpha separated from his true mate for too long could lose himself entirely to the beast within. The man would dissolve, leaving only animal instinct and endless, purposeless rage. She had heard stories of feral alphas laying waste to entire territories before being put down like rabid dogs. Kale could not go feral. He was too strong, too controlled. But even as she thought it, the mark on her hip flared with desperate heat. When do the inspections begin? She asked, keeping her voice steady. The royal guard reaches the eastern villages within the fortnight. Brindlemore will be among them. Brennick's eyes dropped to her swollen belly. Mistress Mora, if there is anything you have not told us, any reason you might wish to avoid such attention. I am a widow, Revna said firmly. Nothing more. The elder studied her for a long moment. Whatever he saw in her face, he chose not to challenge it. Very well, but I would counsel you to have your story prepared. The king's wolves are not known for their gentle questioning. After he left, Revna sank into her chair with her heart pounding against her ribs. A fortnight. She had a fortnight to disappear again, to pack her meager belongings and flee to somewhere even more remote, somewhere the long arm of the crown could not reach. But where? She was nearly 5 months pregnant with twins. Winter had barely released its grip on the land. Travel would be dangerous, perhaps deadly, for her and the children both. And the mark. The cursed, impossible mark that should have faded months ago. It burned now with an intensity she had never felt, as though something on the other end was pulling, clawing, fighting to reach her. Revna crossed to the window and looked out at the marshlands. Her breath died in her throat. The wolves she had seen yesterday were still there. Not at the tree line now, but closer. Much closer. 4 massive shapes sitting in perfect stillness at the edge of her property, their amber eyes fixed on her cottage with patient, predatory focus. Watching. Waiting. One of them lifted its great head and howled. The sound pierced straight through Revna's chest, resonating with something deep in her bones. The twins went wild inside her, kicking and thrashing as though trying to answer. And the claiming mark exploded with fire. Revna stumbled back from the window, gasping as pain radiated from her hip through every nerve in her body. This was nothing like the constant burn she had grown accustomed to. This was searing, overwhelming, as though the mark itself was being torn from her flesh and remade. And beneath the pain, she felt something else. A presence. Massive. Desperate. Pushing against the edges of her mind with a need so raw it stole her breath. Revna. Her name, echoing through the bond she had believed was severed. Revna, where are you? Please, please. She clapped her hands over her ears, though she knew the voice came from within. No, she whispered. You do not get to call for me. You chose her. You chose... A heavy knock shook her door. Revna grabbed the iron poker from beside her hearth. Her shadow gift stirred in her chest, darkness pooling instinctively at her fingertips. Mistress Mora, a male voice, deep and unfamiliar. Please open the door. We mean you no harm. She laughed bitterly at that. Wolves who hunted a pregnant woman across kingdoms meant her no harm. How comforting. But her options were limited. If she ran, they would catch her before she reached the marsh. If she hid, their noses would find her within minutes. And if she fought, she was nearly 5 months pregnant and exhausted. Her shadow gift was powerful, but she had not used it in combat since before her exile. She had no choice. Revna opened the door. 3 men stood on her threshold. 2 were clearly warriors, their massive frames and watchful eyes marking them as elite guards. But it was the 3rd man who commanded her attention. He was tall and lean, with silver threading through dark hair and a face weathered by decades of service. His eyes, a deep burnished gold, held something that looked almost like relief. "My lady," he said, and the title made Revna flinch. "I am Varen, first beta to the Alpha King. We have been searching for you for a very long time." "You have made a mistake," Revna said, her voice steady despite the terror coursing through her veins. "My name is Mora. I am a simple midwife." Varen's expression shifted to something like sympathy. "You are Revna of House Greyvein. You bear the king's claiming mark on your left hip and his heirs in your womb." The poker trembled in her grip. "How do you know about the mark?" "Because the king has described it in detail to every wolf in the realm. Because he has not slept in 3 months. Because he is tearing apart everything he built to find the mate who vanished without explanation." Varen paused. "May we come in?" Against every instinct, Revna stepped aside. The beta entered alone, leaving the guards at the door. He looked around her modest cottage, taking in the drying herbs, the simple furniture, the narrow bed where she had spent countless nights weeping into her pillow. "He did not choose her," Varen said quietly. "Your sister. He did not choose her willingly." Revna's legs nearly gave out beneath her. "What?" "The night of the choosing, someone slipped a compound into the king's wine, a rare poison derived from moonsbane and other herbs we have not fully identified. It severed his connection to his wolf, suppressed the bond, and left him empty. A puppet moving through motions he would never have chosen." "That is impossible," Revna breathed, even as her heart began to race. "We believed so too, until the effects faded 3 days later and the king woke screaming your name." Varen's voice hardened. He remembered nothing of the ceremony, nothing of choosing your sister. The first thing he did was run to find you, and when your chamber was empty. He did not need to finish. Revna sank into the nearest chair, her mind reeling. Drugged. He had been drugged. The hollow eyes, the mechanical movements, the complete absence of recognition. It had not been rejection at all. It had been violation. "Who did this?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "We believe your sister orchestrated it, with the full support of your father." Varen's jaw tightened. "Lord Ambrose has wanted Greyvein blood on the throne for years. When Oriana discovered your secret relationship with the king, she saw her opportunity. The poison was administered by a servant loyal to your house." Oriana. Her own sister had stolen her mate, her future, her everything, and their father had helped. "The marriage," Revna said. "Kale and Oriana, they are wed. Whatever was done to him, the bond with her." "There is no bond." Varen cut her off firmly. "The king has not touched her since the ceremony. He annulled the marriage by royal decree the moment he understood what had been done. Your sister remains at court only because we have not yet gathered sufficient evidence to execute her for treason." Revna's hand flew to her mouth. "Not married. The bond with Oriana never consummated. 3 months of agony, and the entire time, Kale had been fighting to find her." "The children," she whispered. "He knows about the children?" "He suspected from your scent in the chamber. But he did not know for certain until now." Varen's eyes dropped to her belly. "Twins, my lady?" She could only nod. Something flickered across the beta's face. Wonder, perhaps. Or desperate hope. "The curse. If you carry twins and they thrive, it proves I am his true mate," Revna finished. "It proves everything. Which is precisely why your sister wants you dead." The words landed like a blow. Varen withdrew a folded letter from his coat. The seal was broken, but Revna could see the Greyvein crest pressed into the dark wax. The crest of her own family. The message inside was brief. The shadow-touched one has been located. She and the abominations she carries will be eliminated before the next full moon. Long live Queen Oriana. Revna's blood turned to ice. Assassins, she breathed. Varin nodded grimly. We intercepted this by chance. We do not know how many have been sent or how close they are. My lady, the king will find you with or without my help. The bond is guiding him. Every day, he draws closer. As if to emphasize his words, Revna's mark flared with sudden heat. He feels that too, the beta said quietly. Every time your mark burns, he feels an answering fire. It is the only thing keeping him from going completely feral. A howl split the evening air. Close, too close. The two guards burst through the door, their bodies already rippling with the beginning of transformation. They have found us, one of them snarled. Gray vein assassins, at least a dozen. Through her window, Revna saw shapes pouring from the tree line, dark wolves with eyes that gleamed with murderous intent, and leading them, stepping from the shadows with a serrated blade in each hand, was a figure in black whose face was hidden behind a mask shaped like a snarling wolf. The gray vein assassins had arrived. The first wolf crashed through Revna's window in an explosion of glass and fury. Varin shifted mid-leap, his human form dissolving into a massive gray wolf that met the attacker head-on. They collided with a sound like thunder, fangs flashing, and blood spraying across Revna's floor. "The cellar!" one of the guards shouted, shoving Revna toward the back of the cottage. "There is a tunnel." An arrow punched through his throat before he could finish. The guard crumpled, his body shifting halfway between forms as death claimed him. Through the shattered window, Revna saw the masked figure lowering a crossbow, already knocking another bolt. The second guard threw himself in front of Revna as the arrow flew. It took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. The dark liquid glistening on the shaft told her everything she needed to know. Poison. They were not trying to capture her. They were trying to kill her quickly, efficiently, before help could arrive. Varin's wolf form was surrounded now, 3 assassin wolves circling him with coordinated precision. Blood matted his silver-gray fur. One of his legs dragged uselessly. He was losing. Revna's back hit the wall. Her hands shook around the iron poker, useless against wolves and crossbows and the overwhelming force that had descended upon her tiny cottage. She was going to die here. She and the twins, both, murdered by her own family because she had dared to be loved by a king. No. The voice came from somewhere deep within her. Not the bond, not Kale's desperate presence pushing against her mind. This was older. Darker. The shadow gift she had suppressed for years, the power her father had called unnatural, and the darkness that had always lived in her blood. They will not have you. They will not have your children. Show them what lives in the dark. Revna dropped the poker. She raised her hands, and she let the shadows come. The darkness erupted from her palms like living things, tendrils of pure blackness that whipped through the cottage with hungry purpose. They wrapped around the nearest assassin wolf and squeezed. The creature's howl became a gurgle, then silence. The masked figure spun toward her, crossbow rising. Revna's shadows caught the bolt mid-flight, dissolving it into wisps of nothing. "Impossible," the assassin breathed. "You are only what?" Revna's voice carried harmonics that were not entirely human. The shadows swirled around her, lifting her hair, dancing across her skin. A spare daughter? A forgotten sister? A vessel to be discarded? She thrust her hand forward, and darkness surged toward the assassin like a wave. The masked figure dove aside, rolling with trained grace. More wolves poured through the broken windows drawn by the commotion. 6. 8. Too many. Revna's power flickered. She had not used her gift since before the exile, had not trained, had not practiced, had not done anything but hide from what she was. The shadows answered her call, but they drained her with terrifying speed. And the twins. She could feel them stirring, agitated by the power flowing through her veins. Using too much could hurt them. She pulled the darkness back, wrapping it around herself like armor instead of weapon. The assassin wolves circled her, wary now, but not defeated. The masked figure rose, drawing those serrated blades with deliberate menace. "Your sister sends her regards," the assassin said, voice muffled behind the wolf mask. "She wanted you to know. This is what happens to those who reach above their station." The wolves lunged as one. Revna screamed, shadows exploding outward in a desperate shield. She caught two wolves, hurled them back with enough force to shatter bone, but the others were too fast, too many, and her power was guttering like a candle in a storm. Teeth grazed her arm. She twisted away. A claw raked her side. She fell. The masked assassin stood over her, blades raised for the killing blow. "For House Greyvein," the figure intoned, "for the true queen." The blades descended, and the world exploded in black and gold. Something massive crashed through what remained of her cottage wall, moving so fast it was barely a blur. The assassin was torn away from Revna, blades flying from nerveless fingers. A sound filled the air, a roar so loud it seemed to shake the earth itself. Revna looked up through tear-blurred vision. A wolf stood between her and her attackers. Enormous, midnight black, eyes blazing with golden fire that seemed to illuminate the entire clearing. Power radiated from it in waves, pressing down on every other wolf present with crushing, undeniable authority. The alpha. The assassin wolves whimpered and cowered. Even the masked figure scrambled backward, all pretense of confidence shattered. "Impossible," the assassin gasped. "You cannot be here." The bond was severed. The black wolf did not give them time to finish. It moved like shadow given form, tearing through assassins with brutal efficiency. Wolves fell. Blood sprayed. The masked figure tried to run and was caught, those massive jaws closing around their torso with a sickening crunch. In seconds, it was over. The black wolf stood alone in a field of carnage, chest heaving and muzzle dark with blood. Slowly, those burning golden eyes turned to Revna. She could not move, could not breathe, could only stare at the creature that radiated power like heat from a bonfire. The wolf approached her slowly, each step deliberate. Blood dripped from its fur. Its massive body blocked out the moonlight. But when it reached her, it did not attack. It did not even growl. Instead, it lowered its great head and pressed its nose gently to her belly. The twins went wild inside her, kicking, tumbling, and reaching toward the presence of their father with everything they had. The wolf made a sound, a whimper, a question, a prayer. "Kale," Revna whispered, and the Alpha King looked up at her with eyes full of tears. The shift happened between one heartbeat and the next. One moment, a blood-soaked wolf stood before her. The next, a man knelt in the ruins of her cottage, his hands hovering over her stomach, as though afraid to touch her. Kale looked up, and Revna saw that the Alpha King was weeping. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times during her months of exile. She had imagined cold fury, imagined indifferent dismissal, imagined him dragging her back to Karveth in chains to face punishment for fleeing without permission. She had never imagined him on his knees, tears cutting tracks through the blood on his face, his entire body trembling with barely contained emotion. "You are alive," he breathed. His voice was raw, shattered, as if he had been screaming for months. "You are alive, and you are—" His eyes dropped to her swollen belly. His hand reached toward it, then stopped, hovering inches from her dress. "May I?" he asked. The question cracked something in Revna's chest. The Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in 3 kingdoms, was asking permission to touch his own children. She took his hand and pressed it to her stomach. The twins responded immediately, movements erupting from both sides at once. Kale's breath caught. His palm flattened against her belly, feeling every kick, every tumble, every sign of the life they had created together. Twins, he whispered. Our children. Revna, why did you not tell me? The question shattered the spell. Revna pulled away, scrambling backward until her spine hit what remained of her wall. The warmth of the moment dissolved into the cold reality of everything that had happened. Tell you? Her voice came out like broken glass. When should I have done that, Kale? Before or after you chose my sister in front of the entire kingdom? Kale flinched as though she had driven a blade between his ribs. I did not choose her. I would never. I was there. The words tore from her throat. I watched you. I stood in the shadows and watched you take her hand. I watched you raise it to your lips while I hid like some shameful secret you could not wait to discard. Revna, please. Kale rose to his feet, hands reaching for her. I was drugged. Varen told you. The gray veins poisoned me. I remember nothing of that night except waking 3 days later to find you gone. How convenient, Revna spat, even as her heart cracked at the agony in his eyes. Convenient? Kale's voice hardened. You think any part of this has been convenient? I have spent 3 months hunting for you. 3 months fighting my wolf for control. 3 months watching my kingdom crumble while I tore apart every village, every forest, and every corner of the realm searching for the mate who vanished without a word. Because you rejected me. Because I was violated. The roar shook the ruins of her cottage. The word hung between them, terrible and true. Do you think I chose this? Kale's voice cracked. Do you think I wanted to wake up bound to a woman I despise while the woman I love was gone? While our bond screamed in my chest and I had no idea where you were? Whether you were alive? Whether you were suffering? His hands fisted at his sides. His eyes blazed gold. His wolf pressing against the surface. I have not touched her, he said hoarsely. I annulled the marriage within hours of regaining my senses. Your sister remains at court only because I needed evidence before I could execute her. But every moment she breathes the same air as me is a moment too long. Revna's anger faltered. The bond. She had felt it too. Every day of her exile. The burning mark that should have faded but never did. The ache that followed her into sleep and greeted her upon waking. The sense of him searching, always searching, like a distant lighthouse she could never quite reach. I thought you had thrown me away, she whispered. I thought everything you said was a lie, that I was just a convenient distraction until you were forced to choose someone worthy of your crown. Kale closed the distance between them in 2 strides. His hands cupped her face, tilting it up until she had no choice but to meet his gaze. You are worthy of everything, he said fiercely. You are my mate, my true mate. The bond recognized you before I even knew your name. Do you think I would surrender that for politics? For power? For anything in this world or any other? A sob escaped Revna's throat. She had held the grief inside for so long, had built walls around her shattered heart to keep functioning. But now, with his hands on her face and his words cracking through her defenses, those walls were crumbling to dust. I waited for you, she choked out. That night, in my chamber, I was going to tell you about the babies. I had practiced the words 100 times. Kale's expression shattered. Revna, and when you did not come, I went to find you. Instead, I found you choosing her, kissing her hand, looking at her like she was your future while I stood in the shadows carrying your heirs. She struck his chest with her fist, but there was no strength behind the blow. Do you know what that felt like? Do you have any idea? Kale caught her wrist and pressed her palm flat against his heart. Yes, he said quietly. I know exactly what it felt like. Because I have spent every moment since that night living with the knowledge that I failed you, that something was done to me that made me betray the most important person in my existence. His heartbeat thundered beneath her hand, strong and steady and achingly familiar. I have torn apart everything searching for you, Kale continued. The kingdom thinks I have gone mad. Perhaps I have. But I would burn Carveth to ashes before I let anyone but you sit beside me on that throne. The mark on her hip flared with heat, and she felt his answering pulse through the bond. His claim on her, incomplete as it was, resonated with something deep in her soul. Oriana sent assassins, she heard herself say. She and my father. They want me dead. Kale's eyes hardened to molten gold. Then the Greyveins will learn what happens to those who threaten my mate and my heirs. From behind them, Varen limped forward, his body still bearing the wounds of battle. My king, the assassin you killed was Mira Greyvein, Oriana's personal handmaiden and cousin. The name hung in the air like poison. Then there is no more pretense, Kale said grimly. The Greyveins have openly attempted to murder the true Luna of Carveth and the royal heirs. This is war. His hand moved to her belly again, cradling the curve where his children grew. They tried to take everything from me, my mate, my heirs, my very will. I will not allow them to threaten our family ever again. A howl rose from the forest, long and fierce. More followed, dozens of voices joining in a chorus that seemed to shake the earth. The king's wolves have arrived, Varen said. All of them. Revna looked past Kale to see shapes emerging from the darkness, wolves of every size and color, filling the clearing, their eyes gleaming with loyalty and rage. We ride to Carveth tonight, Kale announced. Revna comes with me. The Greyveins answer for their crimes before dawn. Revna wanted to protest, wanted to argue that she was in no condition to travel, that the twins needed rest, that she was terrified of what awaited them. But when Kale looked at her, his golden eyes soft with tenderness beneath the steel, she found she could not refuse him anything. Together? She asked quietly. Kale pressed his forehead to hers. Always, my heart. From this moment until my last breath. Together. The journey to Carveth should have taken 2 days. Kale's wolves made it in 8 hours. Revna rode before the Alpha King on his massive black destrier, his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his body shielding her from the biting wind. She had protested at first. She was perfectly capable of riding her own horse, but Kale had simply lifted her onto his saddle and silenced her objections with a look that brooked no argument. My wolf needs you close, he had said, his voice rough with emotion. 3 months of separation nearly destroyed us both. I will not let you out of my reach until the bond is completed and every threat to your safety is eliminated. So Revna had relented, leaning back against his chest and feeling his heartbeat against her spine. The twins seemed to approve of the arrangement, settling into peaceful stillness for the first time in weeks. As they rode through the night, Kale told her everything. He told her about waking from the drugged haze to find Oriana in his chambers, wearing nothing but a silk robe, attempting to consummate a union he had no memory of agreeing to. About the horror that had flooded through him when he understood what had been done. About throwing Oriana from his rooms and ordering her confined while he ran, half mad, to find Revna. He told her about the search that had consumed every waking moment since, the wolves sent to every corner of the kingdom. The sleepless nights spent poring over maps and reports. The way his control had frayed with each passing day until his own advisors feared to be in the same room with him. My wolf knew you were alive, he murmured against her hair. The bond never fully broke. Every time I tried to accept that you might be gone forever, I would feel a pulse of warmth through the mark. And I knew. I knew you were out there somewhere, waiting for me to find you. Revna's hand moved to cover his where it rested on her belly. I felt it too, she admitted. The burn that never faded. The dreams that felt more real than waking. Kale stiffened behind her. You dreamed of me? Every night. You came to my chamber in the marsh cottage. You spoke to me in words I somehow understood, even though your lips never moved. You told me you loved me, that you would find me, and that nothing would keep us apart. Those were not dreams. Kale's voice was hoarse. My wolf, when I slept, he reached for you through the bond. I thought I was only imagining it. But you actually felt. He trailed off, overcome. Revna turned in the saddle to look at him. In the silver moonlight, she could see the shadows beneath his eyes, the gauntness of his cheeks, the evidence of 3 months of suffering etched into every line of his face. We have both been through so much, she whispered, apart when we should have been together. Kale's hand came up to cup her face. Never again, he vowed. Whatever comes next, we face it as one. No more secrets, no more separation. You are my mate, Revna, my Luna, the mother of my heirs, and I will spend the rest of my existence proving that I am worthy of you. You are worthy, she said softly. You always were. I was just too blinded by pain to see it. Something shifted in his eyes, hope, fragile and fierce. Say it again. You are worthy, Kale, of the crown, of the kingdom, of me. Revna's fingers traced the sharp line of his jaw. I never stopped loving you. Even when I believed you had betrayed me, I could not make myself stop. I love you, Kale breathed, the words seeming to tear free from somewhere deep in his chest. I have loved you since the moment I saw you walking through the castle gardens with shadows dancing at your fingertips. I will love you until the sun burns out and the moons crumble to dust. He leaned down and pressed his lips to hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tender and questioning. But when Revna's hand curled around the back of his neck, pulling him closer, something ignited between them. The bond roared to life. Revna gasped against his mouth as sensation flooded through her. His emotions crashed into hers with overwhelming force. Love, desperate and all-consuming. Desire, barely held in check. And beneath it all, a fierce protectiveness that wrapped around her like armor. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Kale's eyes were blazing gold. Soon, he promised, his voice rough with restrained need. When you are safe, when our enemies are destroyed, I will complete the bond properly, and you will never doubt my devotion again. They crested the final hill as dawn painted the sky in shades of amber and rose. The capital city of Karveth spread before them, its ancient spires reaching toward the heavens. But something was wrong. Smoke rose from the merchant district. The distant sound of screaming reached their ears. And on the great banner that flew above the castle gates, the royal crest had been replaced with the silver serpent of House Greyvane. No, Varen breathed from behind them. They would not dare. Kale's arm tightened around Revna as a growl built in his chest. They have taken the castle. How is that possible? Revna demanded. You have been gone less than a day. The Greyvanes have been planning this for months, perhaps years. Kale's voice was cold with fury. They did not just want me to marry Oriana, they wanted to replace me entirely. A rider emerged from the city gates, galloping toward them at reckless speed. One of Kale's scouts, his face ashen with fear. My king, he gasped. The Greyvanes struck at midnight. They had allies within your own guard. Lord Ambrose has declared himself regent, claiming you have gone feral and must be put down. Lady Oriana has been named queen. A snarl tore from Kale's throat. There is more. They have taken hostages. The servants and guards who remained loyal to you. They are to be executed at dawn as traitors to the true crown. The scout swallowed hard. Including the old nurse who served in the royal chambers, the one who helped Lady Revna during her time at court. Nella. The name struck Revna like a physical blow. Nella, who had brought her warm milk when she could not sleep. Who had helped her hide the claiming mark with carefully applied cosmetics? Who had suspected everything and never breathed a word? We have to save them, Revna said fiercely. Kale looked down at her. Revna, you cannot enter that city. If the Grey Veins capture you. If we do nothing, innocent people die. People who protected me. I will not have their blood on my hands. For a long moment the Alpha King was silent. Then, slowly, a fierce pride kindled in his eyes. My Luna, he murmured. Even now you think of others before yourself? He turned to address the army of wolves assembled behind them. The Grey Veins believe they have won. They believe their treachery has succeeded. That their false queen sits secure upon a stolen throne. His voice rose, carrying across the assembled warriors. They are wrong. A howl rose from the wolves, hundreds of voices joining in a chorus of fury and loyalty. Today, we take back what is ours. Today, we show the traitors what happens to those who threaten our king, our true Luna, and the heirs she carries. The army surged forward, a tide of fur and fang and righteous rage, and at its head, with his mate held close against his heart, the Alpha King rode to reclaim his throne. The battle for Carveth was brutal and swift. The Grey Veins had expected resistance. They had not expected an army of wolves driven by 3 months of rage and the primal need to protect their king's mate and unborn heirs. Revna watched from a protected position on the hillside as Kale led the charge. Even from this distance she could feel his fury through the bond, a blazing inferno that scorched through her veins. His wolf form was death incarnate, a shadow that tore through Grey Vein defenders like parchment. Within an hour, the outer walls had fallen. Within 2, the castle gates lay in splinters. But as the sun climbed toward its dawn peak, a messenger came running with news that froze Revna's blood. My lady, Lord Ambrose has barricaded himself in the great hall with the hostages. He swears if the king does not surrender himself, he will execute them all, starting with the old nurse. Revna was moving before she consciously decided to, ignoring the protests of the guards Kale had left to protect her. Her body ached from the journey, her back screaming with the strain of the pregnancy, but none of that mattered. She had to reach the great hall. The castle corridors were chaos. Bodies littered the stone floors. The scent of blood hung thick in the air. But Revna pushed through it all, following the pull of the bond toward where she knew Kale would be. She found him at the doors of the great hall, held back by Varen and 3 other wolves. You cannot go in there, Varen was saying. It is exactly what Ambrose wants. If I do nothing, innocent people die, Kale snarled. Kale. Revna pushed through the guards. He spun at the sound of her voice. Revna, what are you doing here? I told you to stay. I know what you told me. She stopped before him, tilting her chin up defiantly. And I am telling you that I will not hide while others suffer in my place. This is not your fight. It became my fight the moment my family decided I was an obstacle to their ambitions. Revna placed her hand on his chest. And it became my fight the moment I fell in love with you. Kale's breath caught. In all their months together, through all their whispered conversations and stolen moments, those words had never been spoken so openly. I love you, she repeated, stronger now. I loved you when I thought you had betrayed me. I loved you through 3 months of exile and heartbreak. And I will not let that love make me a coward. She turned toward the great hall doors before he could respond. Lord Ambrose, she called out, her voice ringing through the corridor. I am Revna of House Greyvein, your daughter, the woman your family has tried so hard to destroy. I am coming in. Alone. Revna, no. Kale grabbed her arm. She looked back at him. Trust me, please. Something passed between them through the bond. Not words, but understanding. Faith. And beneath it all, a desperate prayer. Kale released her arm. Revna pushed open the doors and stepped into the great hall. The scene inside was worse than she had imagined. 20 hostages knelt in a line before the raised dais, their hands bound and their faces pale with terror. Armed gray-veined soldiers stood behind them with blades drawn. And on the moonfire throne that should have belonged to Kale sat Lord Ambrose Greyvein, her father, his silver hair gleaming in the torchlight. Beside him stood Oriana. "So the shadow-touched spare returns," Oriana said, her lip curling with familiar disdain. "Look at you, swollen with his bastards. How utterly predictable." Revna ignored her, her gaze finding Nella among the hostages. "Run, child," the old nurse whispered. "Please, run while you still can." "I am done running." Revna turned to face her father. "You want the king to surrender. I am offering you something better." Ambrose raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "Me." Revna placed her hand on her belly. "The king's mate and his unborn heirs, the only children capable of breaking the curse. Take me as your hostage, release the others." "No!" The roar came from beyond the doors. Kale's anguish tore through the bond like shattered glass. But Ambrose was already smiling. An interesting proposition, the shadow-touched daughter in exchange for common servants. He pretended to consider. "Very well, I accept." "Father, wait." Oriana stepped forward. "We should kill her now. Kill her, and the abominations she carries." "Patience, daughter. A dead hostage has no value. A living one, especially one carrying the only viable heirs to the throne." Ambrose's smile widened. "Guards, release the prisoners. Secure my daughter." The hostages were cut free, stumbling toward the doors in confused relief. Nella tried to reach Revna, but soldiers pushed her back with the others. As rough hands grabbed Revna's arms, she felt strangely calm. The bond with Kale pulsed with his panic, his rage, his desperate need to reach her. But beneath all of that, she could feel something else. The twins, stirring within her. And with them, a darkness she had never felt before. Her shadow gift had always been strong. But now, fed by months of suppression and the fierce protective instinct of a mother, it was awakening into something far more powerful. "You made a mistake, father," Revna said quietly. Ambrose laughed. "And what mistake is that?" "You assumed I was still the frightened girl you could control." Revna's eyes began to darken, shadows pooling in her irises. "You forgot that shadows are not merely the absence of light. They are the place where monsters hide." The darkness erupted. It poured from her skin like living night, tendrils of pure shadow that whipped through the great hall with hungry purpose. Soldiers screamed as the darkness wrapped around them, dragging them into pools of black from which they did not emerge. Oriana shrieked, stumbling backward. "What is this? What are you?" "I am the mother of the true heirs," Revna said, and her voice carried harmonics that shook the ancient stones. "I am the Alpha's mate, and I am done being afraid." But the power was too much, too wild, too new. Revna felt her control slipping as the shadows surged beyond her will. The twins kicked violently within her, their own nascent power responding to hers, amplifying it beyond anything she could contain. Pain exploded through her body. "No," she gasped, falling to her knees. "Not now. Please, not now." The transformation she had been fighting for months would not be denied. The shadow gift and the wolf blood collided within her, tearing her apart and remaking her in the same instant. Bones shattered and reformed. Muscles tore and rebuilt themselves. Her scream became a howl as her body surrendered to the change. Lord Ambrose recovered from his shock and drew a blade from his belt. Moonstone-edged steel designed to kill wolves. "If I cannot have the throne," he snarled, advancing toward her convulsing body, "then neither will he." The blade rose, and Revna's transformation completed. Where a pregnant woman had knelt, a wolf now stood. Her fur was black as midnight, shot through with veins of silver that seemed to drink in the light. Shadows curled around her paws like living things, and her eyes, blazing with violet fire, fixed on her father with ancient, merciless hunger. She caught his descending blade between her teeth and bit down. The moonstone steel shattered like glass. Ambrose stumbled backward, his face white with terror. Impossible. You cannot. Shadow wolves are myths. Not myths. Revna's voice echoed through the hall, somehow emerging from her wolf throat in words all could understand. Rare, and very, very angry. She lunged, her jaws closed around her father's sword arm with savage precision. He screamed as bones crunched, as the shadows that clung to her fur seared his flesh with burning cold. She shook him once, twice, then flung him aside like a broken doll. Oriana tried to run. The shadows caught her before she made it 3 steps, wrapping around her ankles and dragging her to the floor. Ravna prowled toward her sister, each step deliberate, shadows pooling in her wake. Please, Oriana sobbed. Please, I am your sister. I am your blood. You tried to steal my mate, Revna said, her violet eyes blazing. You tried to murder my children. You are nothing to me. The great hall doors exploded inward. Kale burst through in wolf form, his massive black body hurtling toward her. Their eyes met across the carnage-strewn hall. His relief crashed through the bond like a tidal wave. Revna, my heart, my shadow. I am here, she answered. I am not going anywhere. The remaining gray-veined soldiers fled. Guards loyal to Kale flooded into the hall, securing the wounded Lord Ambrose and the weeping Oriana. Revna shifted back to human form, her body flowing through the change with surprising ease. She stood naked and unashamed in the great hall, one hand resting on her belly where the twins still grew, miraculously unharmed. Kale shifted beside her, pulling her into his arms with desperate tenderness. You shifted, he breathed against her hair. A shadow wolf. Revna, there has not been one in 5 generations. I had motivation, she whispered, leaning into his warmth. His laugh was broken, wet with tears. My brave, impossible mate. The Greyveins faced judgment before the assembled wolves of Carveth as the sun climbed toward its peak. Lord Ambrose was executed for high treason, his final moments spent begging for mercy he had never shown to others. His head was mounted on a pike above the castle gates, a warning to any who might consider threatening the royal family. Oriana's fate was debated longer. She should die, Varin argued. She orchestrated the drugging. She tried to consummate a false marriage. She sent assassins to murder the true Luna. Death is too quick, Revna said quietly. All eyes turned to her. She stood beside Kale, still wearing the simple dress the servants had found for her, one hand resting on her belly. The twins had finally settled after the chaos of her transformation, sleeping peacefully within her. My sister wanted to be Luna more than she wanted anything else in her existence, Revna continued. She wanted power, prestige, the adoration of the realm. Her eyes met Oriana's across the great hall. Strip her of her wolf. Exile her to the ashlands beyond the eastern border. Let her spend the rest of her days as nothing. No name, no house, no power. Just a woman alone in the wasteland, knowing that everything she sacrificed was for naught. Oriana's screams echoed through the castle as the elders performed the ritual of severance, tearing her wolf from her soul. She was dragged from the hall afterward, human and broken, condemned to wander the ashlands until death claimed her. It was not mercy, it was justice. When the trials concluded, Kale led Revna to the balcony overlooking the kingdom. Below, thousands of wolves had gathered, their faces turned upward with desperate hope. They need to know, Kale said softly. They need to see their true Luna. Revna's hand found his. Together? Always. They stepped forward onto the balcony, and the crowd erupted in howls of joy. Kale raised his hand for silence. 3 months ago, a crime was committed against your king, your kingdom, and the woman fate chose as my mate. The Grey Veins poisoned me, stole my will, and drove away the true Luna of Carveth. They believed they could break the sacred bond between fated mates. His voice rose, carrying across the assembled multitude. They were wrong. He turned to Revna, his eyes soft with love. This woman crossed kingdoms to escape me, believing I had betrayed her. She survived alone, carrying our heirs, hunted by assassins, abandoned by her own family. And when given the chance to hide while others suffered, she chose to fight. She walked into the heart of enemy territory with nothing but her courage and her shadows. He lifted her hand, displaying it to the crowd. This is your Luna. This is the mother of your future rulers. This is my mate, now and forever. The howls that rose from the crowd shook the very foundations of the castle. But Revna was barely aware of them. All she could see was Kale, his amber eyes blazing with love, his hand warm in hers. The bond, he said quietly, pitched for her ears alone. It needs to be completed, properly, if you will have me. Revna thought of everything they had endured, the secret meetings, the whispered promises, the devastating betrayal that had not been a betrayal at all. The months of separation, the battle and the blood, and the terrifying, glorious moment when she had embraced the shadow wolf within. I will have you, she said. I have always been yours, Kale, from the moment we met. He tilted his head, baring his throat to her in the ancient gesture of a wolf offering himself to his mate. Claim me, he said. Make it complete. Revna understood instinctively what to do. Her wolf rose within her, guiding her movements as she pressed her lips to the spot where his neck met his shoulder. She felt his pulse thundering beneath her mouth. Her teeth sank into his flesh. The bond exploded between them. It was not pain. It was completion. Two halves of a single soul finally becoming whole. Revna felt Kale's essence pour into her as hers flowed into him. Every memory, every emotion, every secret corner of their hearts laid bare. She saw the night of the choosing through his eyes, not the empty puppet she had witnessed from the shadows, but the horror of waking with no memory of what he had done. She felt the desperation of his search, the way his wolf had howled in anguish every night, the slow descent toward madness as days turned to weeks with no sign of her. She felt his terror when Lord Ambrose had raised that blade over her convulsing body, felt the way his heart had stopped, the way his wolf had screamed with primal fury, felt the overwhelming relief when her transformation completed and she had stood before him, magnificent and powerful and alive. And he saw himself through her eyes, not a king who had failed her, but a man who had fought against impossible odds to find her. Who had torn his kingdom apart rather than accept a false mate? Who loved her with a ferocity that transcended poison and politics, and even death itself? When Revna finally released him, they were both trembling. Kale leaned forward and sank his teeth into her shoulder, adding a second claim that joined the first on her hip, sealing the bond from both sides. The bond sealed with a flash of golden and violet light that was visible even in the morning sun. My Luna, Kale breathed, pressing his forehead to hers. My king, she answered. Below them, the wolves of Carveth lifted their voices in celebration. 3 months later, on a warm summer evening as the sun set over Carveth in shades of amber and rose, Revna gave birth to twins. A boy with his father's dark hair and his mother's shadow gift, darkness pooling in his tiny palms from the moment he drew breath. A girl with midnight fur shot through with silver when she shifted minutes after birth, her violet eyes already gleaming with ancient power. Kale held his children with tears streaming down his face, his massive warrior's hands impossibly gentle. Thank you, he whispered to Revna, who lay exhausted but radiant in their bed. For fighting for us, for believing, even when I gave you every reason not to. Revna reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the claiming mark on his throat. Her own marks, the original on her hip and the new one on her shoulder, had healed into matching silver scars, all three now gleaming testament to their completed bond. I never stopped believing, she said softly. Even in the darkest moments, something inside me knew. We were always meant to find our way back to each other. Kale leaned down to kiss her, their children nestled safely between them. Always, he agreed. In this life, and every life that follows, you are my heart, Revna, my mate, my shadow, my home. Outside their window, the wolves of Karveth lifted their voices in a howl of joy that echoed across the kingdom. The curse was broken, the true heirs lived, and the shadow-touched daughter who had once been called unnatural now sat beside her king as the most beloved Luna in 3 generations. They had found each other against all odds, and they would never be parted again. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story.